You ready, girl?
Hello, this is the Boy Girl Mom and Dad podcast. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Nick, and I just took a sip of my coffee.
You get on to me for introducing you every week, and then you are not prepared. So
this is how much of a pattern it is that you haven't let me say my own name. So I'm used to not being able to.
Say my name. All right. Okay. This is episode 43, How to Be a Cool Mom with Haven Weits.
Boy, girl, mom and dad here for the good times and the bad. Gender norms and stereotypes to making sure that the butts are wet. Boy, girl, mom and dad want grown-up time, you're going mad. It's a trip, but we'll guide you through with tips and tricks for boys and girls too.
Should we introduce Haven? She's here.
Yeah, let's introduce Haven. Haven is an entrepreneur who runs a fractional virtual assistant company. But she is so much more than that. She is a mom of 2, and she's so calm, cool, and inclusive, and I thought she would be great to talk about how to be a cool mom. And most important, my favorite thing, she is my friend. Welcome, Haven.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to take a sip from coffee. Nick was doing.
Be like Nick.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
And Nick, you would call Haven a friend too, not just me.
Sorry, yes, the way I would say it is that Haven allows us to be her friend.
Yeah.
Oh, an honor. I love both of you guys, individually and as a couple.
Too sweet.
Thank you. Alrighty. We start off every week with a Tiff, and Haven, this week you get to join us on ours. Nick, did you have one prepared, or do you want me to say mine?
You know, I don't want you to take another one. But you have props, so I don't know how I can say you can't use your props.
Yeah.
You can go ahead this week.
Okay. So we start every episode with a Tiff, something we may agree with, something we may disagree with, just something to break the ice. And I thought I would make it food themed because something Haven and I love to do is eat at really good restaurants, mostly not chain restaurants. So anyway, we are going to talk about forks. If you're watching with us on YouTube, I'm holding up 2 different kind of forks here. One is larger, one is smaller. I'll go into what the forks are, but do you have a preference of the forks is the question. There's not a wrong answer here, Nick. I know you're like, but there's not a wrong answer. I would say I like this fork better. It is the smaller fork. It is an interchangeable, I would say, dessert and salad fork. And this is the main course fork. What's your favorite, Nick?
First of all, I think it's hilarious that you're asking fork questions with 3 food nerds in the room that on a podcast that has nothing to do with food. So that's really funny to me.
Hey,
I was going to say, because I've got opinions now too. I'm ready to answer this one.
Good. Okay, so maybe I'm crazy. Call me crazy, but I use the forks for their intended use, which I know weird. So I use the small fork for salads and for some starters, and the larger fork for my main course or for actual dinner in a coursed meal. So yeah, I guess the way that you're asking the question makes me feel very weird to answer that way, but hey, Haven, how do you feel about the forks?
So I think it's such an interesting thought. Obviously we have both sizes in our drawer, and when people come over, if there's like formal, maybe I'll put out 2. But the way that I think about it of which one I'm going to grab is how hungry am I? If I'm very hungry, I want the big fork to get a lot of food on it. If I'm not very hungry, I go little fork. So it has nothing to do with what I'm eating. It goes with like, how quickly do I want the most amount of food to go into my mouth?
Wow. So the reason I like the smaller fork is because the base is wider. So I can actually fit more, in my opinion, food on the fork. And it can get to my mouth faster because the tongs are shorter.
So to me, I'm selecting the right fork for the right course, and you guys are basically trying to select the biggest shovel. That's what I'm hearing.
Also, just like fun fact for this, like I said, is an interchangeable dessert and salad fork. A true salad fork will have little indents to where the tongs are not all the same. It'll have 2 like with a little extra thing here, I guess, to like grip the lettuce better. So there's your fun fact for today on the
Where did you learn this? Like cotillion?
That's what I was going to ask. What etiquette course? Also, the fact that you know that makes it hilarious that you don't care what fork you're picking, really.
So, you guys, there's also this thing called Google that I researched before we did the podcast because I was like, wait, is there a difference between a dessert and a salad fork? And most forks today are interchangeable. So I researched it. So I don't just know that off the top of my head. Most of the things I look up, I'm like, There's that meme I showed you last night, Nick, that was like, me trying to go to sleep. Also me. How tall was Jesus? Like, just because there's things I'm interested in knowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is
Alright.
such a good starter for me as a guest because we have our foodie club dinners where
Yes.
you, me, and our friend Gaia will let Lauren choose the restaurant because we very much so trust her opinion. We usually also trust you to order for us because we realize we do a lot of group setting stuff, but when people would do suggestions, we would be like, ugh, why would we waste our time and money and calories there? No way. Like we were like realized that we were the most opinionated and we're like, we need a sub crew where we can really enjoy fine dining.
Yes. Yes.
I
And
mean, have those restaurant selections been good and impressive to you, though, Haven? Are you like, how's Lauren's track record?
Oh, 10 out of 10.
Okay.
I always leave satisfied.
Good.
Fun fact: she picks what she wants to order weeks in advance, not like an hour before. Like she'll review the menu if she knows she wants to go to a restaurant, and just store that information in her head. It's
So,
hilarious to me.
Nick, here's the thing though, that was old me. I still do that when I am able, but most of the time right now, I don't have time to do that.
That's actually a good lead-in to
What
the
a good
It's a
parenting
good-
segue to
podcast.
parenting.
It is a good
Yeah.
segue. And I actually forgot to say in your intro also, Haven runs a book club. She's like a master connector is a great way to describe her. And then you also may recognize her from her podcast, Haven, where she also talks about relationships and parenting and things like that. So just another reason why I thought she would be a good person to have on. And I actually, before we get into the meat, I want to say thank you for being so gracious and letting us move the recording because we were going to do it the other week and I went to Disneyland instead. And I think I was so nervous to tell you that, but I also knew like you were so good about like making the best decision for you. And I don't mean that it could sound like it's not mean. What word am I thinking?
That's not the way you described it in the past. That sounds way different than what you actually mean.
I
What
think
she
that's
said.
at the heart of what you're saying. I think like
Okay.
when I see it's like, oh, a trip to Disneyland with your kids or something that was virtual that can't be moved, like go with the Disneyland. Absolutely.
Well,
Not everybody would think that way, though, and I think that's the compliment Lauren's trying to extend to you.
you are really inclusive and like think about others, but then you also make sure to think about yourself, which I think is sometimes really hard to do as a person in general, but especially as a mom. And so because I knew you thought like that, I figured it would be fine, but I still like, you're taking your time like to speak with us and all that. So like I never want you to feel like we're taking advantage of you and your time. So I just want to say thank you and thanks for being a cool mom.
You're so welcome. I would never ever think you would ever take advantage of me. And I know you know that.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell myself that, but again, that's why we're going to talk about being a cool mom. So, Nick, do you have anything before we get started? I don't want to just overrun.
I
It's
have no
okay.
more silverware related opinions. No. And I would also like to mention that I think I'm in permanent consideration for the Foodie Club membership, but I'm not sure if I'll ever be accepted. I did have a trial meal, but I
Nick,
haven't received a report from that, so I'm hopeful.
somebody has to watch the kids, so.
Uh-huh.
I was going to say, I was surprised that it didn't come up earlier because I know that we even have the sub foodie club where it's, our pending members.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you
it
did
depends
receive
on childcare.
you did receive leftovers from the last time we went. So you were there in spirit. You were thought of.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same way you would bring back, food for a dog, right?
Okay, we need to move on, but I personally love leftovers and
I'm kidding. I love
we
the
can
leftovers, and
people
being thought of makes me very happy.
people do have opinions on that, but we can say that for another time.
Okay.
So, to top it off, my first question for you, Haven, is what parenting style, Haven, do you most identify with? What do you call yourself if you were to put yourself in a box of parenting
I
styles?
think there are two terms that I would probably resonate with the most that I've kind of seen out there. One of them is called a free range parent, where I think it's like I visualize it literally as if it's like a big farm where it's got a big peripheral of a boundary and a fence, but so much room to explore and play. Or the second one is a lighthouse parent, where like I'm steady, I'm there in the ocean, I'm always kind of looking and everything, and they know where to find me, but they're kind of discovering their own path. So those are the two that I would say I resonate with parenting style wise.
I love that. I obviously knew the free range, and I do think of you with that, but I never heard the lighthouse. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that like just so sweet. It makes me think of, was it Pete Puff? No, not Puff. Pete the Imaginary Dragon, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be your candle on the water.
I
My light
thought
for
you were
you
about to
will
say
always burn.
I thought you were about
No,
to say Puff the Magic Dragon, and I was gonna ask
that's a
different
different
questions.
song,
Me too, and
which
Okay,
I was like,
I
different
can
vibes.
yeah.
I can sing that one too. But no, that's
Hold on, I
really
have something to say. So,
oh
the latter parenting style you referenced, the Lighthouse one, I haven't heard that term either, but I like it. And we've actually referenced something that sounds similar when we spoke to your sister, Lauren, and we were talking about, I forget what she called it, but where the parent and the home should be such a safe and encouraging space that your kids are essentially able to boomerang out or find their comfort levels out into the world, and then always have the place to be able to come back and find that security. I think your sister called it like the loops of security or something like that. I don't
the
remember.
circle of security,
Thank you.
and it just represents a healthy attachment style. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I know it's not a direct parenting style, but I thought of that when Haven, you referenced Lighthouse as a term. That was nice.
Yeah. Were you always like this? Like, think about you growing up. Were you always this cool, but this free range, as a child, but now as a parent, like how did your childhood affect how you parent? Um, and like, did you plan to be like this as a parent, or is it something you have to or was it something you had to work on?
Hmm. I'm still so new into parenting. So my kids are like 4.5 and 2.5. So I think at this stage, I'm still just operating out of like just natural, like it's very natural for me to do that because in childhood, I was so independent, like just so independent, really wanted to do my own thing. But I did have a safe home base to go to. So, kind of talking about like whatever your sister was talking about is like I knew I could always go back and I had a great baseline. But like I was a kid where if we were going on a tour group, I was ditching my family and standing right by the tour guide. And my parents would just joke that like I just joined other families all the time. And like, cause I was like, well, I want to learn and they're in the back. Like, I want to ask the tour guides. Like, I just would just almost relinquish that I had a family and go do what I wanted and then come back. So I think it's just my personality. So it naturally comes out in parenting where I think I just really want them to build their own self-esteem and their own confidence and autonomy. So I think of like we live in an apartment complex that has like a courtyard, but it's open in the middle. And my 4 year old, she's got some neighborhood kids. I'll open my front door and listen and look over, and I let her go and take the elevator down herself with her and her little brother and go and knock on the kids' doors and scooter around. And I can hear her from time to time where something like, oh, my mommy says I can do this. An adult is like, are you sure? And then I have to like yell over the railing, like, yes, I'm listening. Like, she's good. And they're like, okay. Like, so I think it's just natural because that's what I enjoy. And so I want to kind of have the kids be like within their age appropriate, like you absolutely can use an elevator to go to a different floor and ask. Like you're capable, you're so capable and you want to. Of course you can. And it makes her feel so confident and so cool. She just tells everyone, I can use the elevator by myself. And like it's just like a little like confidence boost to her.
Cut to my childhood where one of my sisters refused to exit the elevator as a young girl and was closed in the elevator and rode 25 floors without the entire family, and we had to go find her. I guess that's
Oh,
the
that
opposite.
is like the worst
Yeah.
case scenario though, because then you're like, what floor did they get off of? Are they
Yep.
okay?
Hmm.
Well, and I think because you're giving her the freedom now, like she's not only building up the confidence, but like when you let them out, they're not like bursting at the seams per se, like to leave. Because, like if you're too tight, often the pendulum swings the other way. It also reminds me of the book we read, Haven, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, where,
Hmm.
they'll let the kids go and, play, like give them freedom within it. And so they're experiencing it. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and the boundaries are like, don't go in other people's apartments. Like you're not allowed in there. Even if they invite you in, you're not allowed. Like, stay within here. Don't go to the main floor. Like, they know the little pockets of where there's freedom too, which I think is important. It's not like totally like, hey, best of luck going into, neighbor's house. Like, I want to be present if it's outside of the common space, but there's so much room and freedom to play within that, boundary.
Well, it definitely seems effortless, so it doesn't surprise me that it's just in your nature for this. But I also know that you're a big proponent of talk therapy. Do you think that has had any impact in your parenting style?
I think it has. I didn't have it as much growing up in childhood, in the sense that I had a really lovely childhood. It just wasn't really valued to like talk about like feelings or emotions or, things that are coming up. So I'm still kind of in discovery of what that looks like for me as a parent, because I had a blueprint of a lot of great aspects. It's just I didn't have this one. So I do think it is, but it still feels pretty clunky of, trying to figure out at a 4-year-old level, like talk therapy of like, even that, like, why can't I go into my friend's apartment without, you? How do I say, like, well, I don't trust them and they could be pervs? Like, I don't know, like, how can I adjust that down to a 4-year-old level of concepts where I'm okay with her repeating it? So, versus because I'm the mom and I said so, which is not a route I'd want to take either. So it's also just, I'm still trying to figure out that middle ground, but I'd say it's definitely informing it.
Have you seen the it's not a meme, it's just like things I've seen on Instagram where it says like don't say stranger danger. Have you seen that?
Mm,
To where it's like, the people who are often the quote bad ones are not strangers. And so that's just a completely side tangent that I thought was interesting because we haven't really had that discussion either with, our 2.5-year-olds. But, there's feelings that we talk about, but it's definitely and that will impact how we talk about like strangers, if you will, and like the as far as like going into other people's apartments and things like that.
yeah, and I don't want to put in them that the world is a scary, big, bad
Yeah.
place. But I do want to also teach her, like, I think the word that I once heard was saying, like, sometimes adults can be sneaky, and we
Mm,
need to look out for sneaky adults or sneaky people. And I like that word too, because then it kind of puts it back on them of like they can suss out sneaky versus, danger that's hard to like really pinpoint at a child level.
yeah.
I have a funny thing. So you referenced when you were a kid, Haven, leaving your family a little bit and attaching to the other groups and families. Um, I've been an extrovert my whole life, and my parents tell
No.
stories. Yeah, big surprise, right? Uh, my parents tell stories about when they would go to restaurants. I would get up and I would go talk to every single table, whether they wanted to talk to me or not. So if I wasn't at the table, my dad just knew, oh, he's probably in that corner talking to the other family. He'll come back.
What's so funny is I see that a little bit with Cypress. Like he's so verbal
Mm.
and he really like connects with everyone. So I wonder if it's like a little similar to how you were as a kid because he like whenever we do those activity stuff, like he's telling everyone like what we're up to and what's happening and like he goes around each individual and talks to them, which I thought was just such a cute unique trait and it makes sense that it was like perhaps inherited from you.
That's so sweet.
I do think that they have your, like, extrovert skills because even, like, Olive, we'll be on a walk, and she'll just wave, and I think, like, part of it is, like, Nick always had them waving at people, like, when they were babies, it wasn't Nick waving the hand, it was them, um, and, even now, Olive will still do it and be like, "Hi, friend." So, yeah, no,
Hmm.
I definitely think that. Um, again, even though this is so effortless for you, there has to be, like, a hardest part. What is the hardest part of this, like, parenting style for you?
Hmm. Before I even get into that question, I want to answer what like or what made me think of when you said that she says hi friend. I think that's such a great response opposite of stranger danger. Like assuming friendship in people and assuming that people are like worth like nodding and like saying hi to. I just think that's cool because it also sets like a different trait for kids. So I think it's cool that it's like very similar along the lines of what you were saying of, we don't want to put this heavy thing of like it's also usually someone you know. So if we're
Yeah.
gonna like assume strangers look friendly. But the hardest part, I would say, is that other people feel the need to step in because they feel like I'm
Mm,
abdicating responsibility. So
Mm.
I get this all the time is on a park, someone coming over and being like, oh, like standing behind them, or, like they're way more concerned. Where for me, I'm like, they need to learn balance. If they fall, they'll fall once and then learn to like not do that. But my kids, like, knock on whatever wood, like, they're not like insanely reckless. Like they
yeah.
usually are learning what to do. And so I give them that freedom based on like their personalities, but strangers will step in and, feel the need to be like, are you sure? Like, where's your mommy? Or like on the elevator, or, those kind of things where I'm like, I'm absolutely here and present. I would love to give them the opportunity to fail or potentially get hurt or whatever, because I think it's learning and I'm here to comfort and help them troubleshoot for the next one. But I think the biggest issue is that, like, from the outside, it perhaps looks like lazy parenting or someone who's not taking care, because I think our culture is very helicopter right now.
Hmm.
So I get a lot of, helicopters flying about, coming in and, trying to protect my kids.
So I've read articles about this. This actually makes me think about the differences in societal parenting with the U.S. compared to Europe and other countries over the Atlantic, where, for example, like the concept of another parent who doesn't know you coming up to parent your child, aside from like rescuing them from some emergency, that's a foreign concept in Europe. But here, to your point, Haven, I feel like people do that a lot. They'll look for some way to either judge or overparent compared to that parent they think isn't doing the right thing, or come and support somebody who's on a balance beam because they don't think mom's close enough. That's something that doesn't happen um, overseas.
I wish it was foreign here.
I know.
I feel like part of it is like their parents are either really helicoptery or really not. And so like I've been around your kids, so I know who they are. And like whenever they're doing things by themselves, they're not doing anything, quote, like I don't even want to use the word bad or like wrong. They're just like being themselves. Whereas like I can think of kids who parents are not paying attention like you are, and then they're doing things that are like bad. We don't want to use that word, but I can't think of another one
Mm,
right now. And like for example, we were at this like play place thing over the weekend, and I was with Olive just sitting there because she wanted to play with these trucks. And there were boys there who were older who were completely not paying attention. Their parents were not paying attention. They were sitting there talking to each other, but they didn't see each time they were, like pushing Olive out of the way. And so like I was there and I was like, again, somewhat hovering in this instance just because I could see how they were being in at one point. They like
Well, you were
pushed.
also playing with Olive. You were
Yeah, I was
right there.
playing with her.
Yeah.
But I wasn't intervening. Like she would look at me when things were happening. I'm like, it's okay, just like, learning how to play with others. But there was one point where he like pushed her out of the way and I went over and I was like, okay, we're not gonna do that. And in that moment, like I don't parent other people's children, but I was not going to allow him to just push her like that. And his mom like saw all happen and me once I got up and like came over, and I feel like that is a very different, in my head, a different example than just like letting your kids learn and be free and be themselves and grow confidence.
totally.
Yeah. So that was a hard part. What's the easiest part?
Seeing them gain self assurance and self confidence and really being proud of themselves. Like, I just see like her stand up taller and, finding her voice. Like, my daughter's a little more on the shyer side. And so I'm just so happy anytime that she, like finds her voice. And so even if we're going to order at a restaurant, she knows she orders her own food. And she loves that. Like, even if we're going to like an In and Out, I'll roll down her back window and let her, yell. And
Mm.
they always kind of look at me and I'm like, yeah, it's good. And then she'll be like, if she tries to sneak in, like, oh, and can I get a milkshake? I'm like, okay, well, not that one, girl. Like, good for you for
Good
trying.
try. Shoot your shot.
Yeah, yeah. Why not go for it? But I think the easiest part is that at least my children really want it. They really want to have like autonomy and like permission, but they also want to know that I'm there. So I think the easiest part is I do think that aspect is a win-win. Sometimes they don't want it. Like sometimes she's like, "Oh, will you carry my toy or whatever?" I'm like, "If you bring something, like you need to have it." And then that's when it's like they want it when they want it. They don't want it. It's like The Office when Ryan's like, "Lead me when I want to be led." Like that's kind of how it feels.
Love the reference.
So, with this kind of free range parenting style that you do, and you're so good at it, was this something that you and your husband agreed with, slash, y'all parent the same way?
I don't think we ever thought of it in advance because there's so many things we can talk about with parenting, but until the rubber hits the road, like I just didn't really know what category we'd fall into. We definitely agree with it in the sense of like we're both okay with the kids, scootering outside with the door open or that kind of thing. There are some times where he'll maybe do like a gentle pushback of like, do you feel like they're ready for this or is this okay? So I'm a little bit more letting them be, or for me, like I'm not as opposed to big messes that we figure out, where Aaron's more on the side of like, okay, we need to have them clean this up and then get to the next thing. Like for me, I'm like, it'll all shake out. So that's where we would probably kind of disagree of like the timing of when we adjust from the free range, but overall, I think we're pretty aligned with like we both want to give them some autonomy.
Yeah, because the reason I ask is because this is titled "A Cool Mom" just because, it's a Mean Girls reference of like, "I'm a cool mom," but the
Oh
way
yeah,
that
every
you
millennial gets that one.
Woo! The way that you mother, it's effortless and natural to you, but I think that a lot of people can learn to be like that and then in turn feel less anxious. Because that's the whole point of this is, like, it's not to say, like, you're not a cool mom and you're not a cool mom, is that everybody can be a cool mom, and part of being a cool mom is being, like, calm and collected and not letting your baggage and emotions, like, dictate your kids and how that they're raised. Obviously, it will to some extent, but just being aware of yourself and like how it can and cannot affect your kids is just cool in and of itself. So it's something you should be very proud of. Can you share a moment in your parenting journey with this free range-ish parenting style that has made you proud to parent this way?
Hmm.
I guess you kind of gave it with like, them ordering food or anything like that, but if you have another
Hmm.
example.
Yeah, let me think. Yeah, I think at this stage of where I am with like 4.5 and a 2.5-year-old, I like it that they're not trying to fight for so much independence because they get a lot. I found that I've actually had the opposite effect with them where they ask my permission a lot. Like
Mm.
more than a lot of kids, they'll come up and be like, "Hey, can I go jump on this table?" Or "Can I go do this?" And I don't realize it until we're around other people and they bring it up. But like, I think because they know I'm so open to saying yes, but also like
Hmm.
I will address it if they've done something without like checking with me first. So I think what I'm most proud of is that like they're not trying to find little ways to, assert themselves or, make it a stance about things because I am so open on most things that the inverse effect of they really do check with me and trust me. And sometimes obviously if I say no, they're upset, but for the most part, they're like they don't have tantrums if I say no because it is fewer and far between.
You actively try to say yes. Are you one of the people who actively tries not to say no?
I typically don't say no, period. Like, even if they're like, can we have some popsicles? It's like, sure, later on. Or, yeah, tomorrow afternoon. Like, it's not a no. Like, I try and reserve those for safety
Right.
overall. Like, if
Mhm.
it's a safety and I really need to pull it into my back pocket and it's a strong, stern no. But if they're asking things, I usually always try and bend it a little bit of like, whenever they're asking, I'm like, yeah, definitely, like in a couple weeks, because today we're actually going to swim class, or something
Mm.
like that, where it's not just a no, not right now, because in their brains they're hearing that as you'll never get to do it.
Yeah, and if
Lauren,
you're
you're good at that.
well, I
Mm-hmm.
have to actively think about it. That's why I was asking it. And, Nick, this was the question that we were asked the other day about like saying, like, trying not to say no. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think there is something to it because when you let your no's be no and like stand on their own, then they're a lot, I don't know,
They have more power than
they
you
have more
intend
weight.
them to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, to your point, like, that's a perfect example of how, like, they kind of just, like, let your no be a no and be like, "That she really means it, but she lets me like, do yes, like, all the time." Makes me think of, the Yes Day book, but, of course, like, Jennifer Garner made it into a movie. It's just, like, so sweet and such a good idea. The concept is, like, you let your kids have, like, a day where they basically plan it, so it's, like, yes to everything that day within reason, and there's boundaries, but just a fun little thing to consider, especially if you yourself as a parent are having trouble like saying no all the time.
I
I
do want to
love
do
that. I
that.
can't wait to do that one day with them. I feel like my kids are a little young on that, but I do think whenever it's like introduced to something special, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
I agree. I also want it instead of just be yes day, I want it to be like Cypress's day or Olive's day, you know.
Hmm.
I mean, they can have joint ones too, but like where the focus is on their yeses, not just kids versus parents.
Yeah, I like that.
I want to compliment you and your husband, Haven. I think something that is an enabling factor for the type of parenting styles that you've selected, to use your words, the free range and the Lighthouse style. I think that only works as effectively as we collectively think it does with your children if the parents have like a quiet and humble strength, and they have like this humble confidence that allows the kids to feel comfortable in that environment. So said another way, like if you and Aaron were consistently nervous, even if you let your kids be the free range children that you're hoping for them to be, they may always recognize, even with nonverbal communication from you, oh, mom and dad seem a little scared with me doing this thing, or maybe I shouldn't. I'm recognizing the nervousness in their face, or whatever else they may be recognizing from you. They obviously aren't seeing that, and they're getting the nonverbal signals from you and Aaron that they have the permission to explore. I mean, said another way, I doubt you said to them, go do whatever you would like, and I'm here and it's safe.
Hmm.
That comes from like who you guys are. And also, I'll shut up in a second. I'm sorry. Um, I'm excited that we're getting to know you guys better, because it makes perfect sense why this feeling exists. But before, I mean, I'm not one of your kids, but before we knew you guys well, um, I sensed that like the humble, quiet confidence and strength. There's like a sense of peace around both of you that I'm sure your kids pick up on. And that has to be one of the reasons that they're comfortable in these styles.
I'm so honored that you say that and, think of us that way. Like, that means so much to me. And I appreciate, because even thinking about this, like, one, I think it's awesome you chose me for cool mom. Like, anyone would be like, wow, like, yeah, like, because it's just cool to hear that. I think the ability to do that is because it's not fear based. Like, I think that's a big thing of like just not being afraid, and so much of it is in the power of language, where like you're right, like even if they're doing something what seems dangerous, like the switch of, instead of saying like be careful or you could fall, it's listen to your body,
Mhm.
listen to your
Yeah.
body, like use your balance or work on your balance,
How does your body feel in that? Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's also where, I think it's they pick it up on it in like our essence, but also in, just the words of like I don't want them to feel like, you know, they're incapable in this world, that they
Yeah.
can't trust themselves. Me externally saying be careful if they're not nervous about being careful, and now all of a sudden there's like this confusing confliction inside of them. Like, I'd rather coach and guide them in the direction versus like making them kind of second guess or feel like there's something to be afraid of that they're not picking up on.
Haven, I know you had the mentor-mentee relationship conversation on your podcast recently. In my mind, like the respect that you have for like the quiet strength of a good leader in a mentor-mentee relationship in the professional environment is similar to how I'm sure kids pick up on the same signals, right? So like, for example, you're not micromanaging, you're not fear-based, letting them do whatever they want. um, they obviously recognize that strength and peace around you and Aaron. So they are encouraged, therefore, to not only go out and try things, but to know they can come back to you, and respect you enough to do so. Right.
Totally. And I think that is so much of like a leader is like the most secure leader doesn't have to flex or yell or, do
Right.
these kind of like empty threats or whatever. Like, they're not worried, like they know that they are, the not the end all decision maker, but they know that they have that authority and that responsibility. And so I think that is too of like you're right, like the in business or in the family, it's kind of like just knowing of I'm not, concerned trying to prove to you that, I'm the one in charge here. And I
Yeah.
feel like those are some of the best kind of leaders is when they're more servant oriented leadership.
Yeah, this will connect back to parenting as well. But like when I interview, one of the things I look for is if somebody is more excited about managing people or enabling people. So if they use
Mm.
words like, I want to be in this role to make sure that these people get their job done, and get on them when I need to if they're not, that type of oppressive micromanaging language is separate from the humble leader who's thinking about how can I enable my team, not what's the reporting structure and am I at the top.
Absolutely. And they could be saying the same thing, but the path to get there is like so different.
Right. Right. And again, that's similar to parenting, right? Like if you're the micromanager parent, the one that's fear based, that comes through. and it doesn't provide a conducive environment, or an encouraging environment rather, for your kid to want to come to you when
Hmm.
they have a question or want permission for something.
I just have to say, like, if you're, like, worrying, that, like, Nick, it's basically the same thing you were saying of, like, the peace that we feel with, like, Haven and Aaron, their kids can definitely pick up on. If a parent is anxious all the time, your kid can definitely pick up on it, but there is hope. Like, it's never too late to, like, start over or try again, or have reconciliation if that needs to happen. So it's never too late for that, and that's kind of, like, also why we're talking about this, is so that we can all grow and be better together. Kind of on
Yeah,
that
and
note. Oh, go ahead.
I want to add too of like I think those parents, it's because they love their kids
Oh,
and they
for
want them
sure.
to be safe and okay. Like it's also like, yeah, maybe it's not like the best end result, but I'm like, oh my gosh, like you love your kids so much and you're so concerned for their safety and their well-being and their heart and everything. Like I can understand the urge to want to jump in and solve is because you don't want to see them hurt or struggle, or like it comes from such a place of like care, that like I can understand how it gets there, but I do think it's like a short term, shortcut versus a long-term gain for their structure. Or maybe it's about our own need to self-soothe of it's uncomfortable for me to watch them struggle, so I'm going to step in too. And I
Hmm.
think it's like it's never too late to address, why am I doing this? Like, am I doing it because I don't want to see them do that, because I don't really like to struggle, so why would anyone else like to, so much of it is like if you can address of why am I behaving it this way instead of even just going off of the symptom.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, like, you've had a gentle parenting episode as well, and so have we, and, like, we both read, The Worry-Free Parent with Sissy Goff, and how it's just, like, our job to be the calmest person in the room, and the issue with, like, the parents have is, like, if they haven't addressed their own issues, that's coming out too, um, and so it's all together a wonderful mesh, and that's why we're having this conversation.
I'm
Another
not saying
thing.
you do
Oh.
this, Haven, or you, Lauren, but I also wonder if one of the reasons parents decide to step in and take some of that freedom away from their kids, if you will, is to avoid the judgment of the prying eyes of other parents around them.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, and actually that's, like, what I have written down like, in my notes at the beginning, like, just to talk about Haven, is because you don't let the outside pressure get to you, and, like, to say, like, you care deeply, but when it comes to, like, other people's thoughts about you doing what's best for your family, it's just, like, a no-brainer for you, like, that doesn't matter, and I think you're able to tune that out, like, so well. Uh, I think that's what you were saying, Nick, right?
yeah. Haven, did you
Along
know
those
this was
lines?
going to be just like a compliment fest for you?
I
Because
don't know, but I love being a guest here. I'll come back anytime.
she's like, can we make this weekly?
Yeah, I mean, sign me up.
um, but kind of what I was leading into is, like, another book that I know that you're obsessed with and that I liked it too. I read it, was Dr. Becky Good Insides, and how uh you're supposed to treat kids uniquely. And so I was wondering if you had adjusted your parenting style at all between your first child and your second. And obviously there are some differences, like your first child was a girl and then now you have a boy. So there are some, like, I think, inherent differences there, but overall, have you adjusted anything? Because kids are different, and one parenting version may not be the best for the other, and that's fine.
I absolutely have. And it's not in the number of kids, 1 to 2, it's just in them being different people. Where Isley is this like so sensitive and loving and cares so much about what I think that I have to be careful with like a natural tone. Um, where Echo, my son, like you could yell or hit him over the head. Like I don't like just the most aggressive and he would laugh at you. Like he's been known to laugh, like it's just they're so different. But Isley the other day, it was literally this week, she was asking something about wanting to color. She loves to color and she was like pulling something out and I said, "Oh, it's not there or something." And then she was like, "I don't know if that's true." And I was like, "Well, it's not there." And then she'd never asked this question and she goes, "Well, are you lying to me?" Like, and she's never asked that before. And I looked at her and like my natural, I was like, "Are you kidding me? I would never lie." Like I was saying it like how dare, not like a how dare you, but kind of like a, I would never lie. And like, but it was just a sharp, like, are you kidding me? And she sobbed,
Hmm.
ran to her room, like was crying. And I came in there and she goes, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, honey, like, it's okay. And then her new thing that she's been saying is like, I forgive you. I forgive you. And like, she'll
Hmm.
say it to me, like, and I was like, honey, like, that was such a sharp tone. Like, I just want you to know that, like, I will always tell you the truth, and you never have to question if I'm, lying. And like, tried to salvage it, but just one sharp tone comment sends her down. And so I just know that, like, oh, I have to be always vigilant of, you know, the way I'm responding to her, where maybe my natural tones or reactions to things are a little too intense for her sometimes. And I have to be cognizant of the impact on her, due to the fragility of how much she cares about my opinion.
Hmm.
And there's actually science behind that. I obviously know their personalities, and so I can totally see it, but there's science behind, like, talking to boys and talking to girls, and how boys, you essentially have to yell at them for them to hear you. Just
Mm-hmm.
like how their brain works, and it's wild. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Oh, I was like, "Huh?" And actually,
I'm glad that landed.
That's a
ugh.
good clip. Speaking of, socials.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of too.
Um, you brought up a good point because whenever I asked the question, Haven, I was really talking about, like, did you parent your first child different than your second child? But you said you didn't change parenting from going from one to two, which is also a good question that I probably didn't think of because I was just, fresh out of the gate with two. But I feel like and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you didn't really change parenting. And I think that's probably because you are free range. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the people who are like helicopter, when they add another, they're like, okay, I can't, two helicopters can't be in, or one helicopter can't be in the same place as two. You know what I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
here? That could have been a cool thing to say. But basically, you can't be in two places at once. And so you really can't helicopter as well,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Yeah, like I don't think it changed in that sense of the, like, I've always prided myself in being like very one-on-one connected with each kid. And so I think that's also it, where like, I don't think it changed as like parenting styles. I think it just had to be a little bit more intentional and kind of getting to know their different personalities.
Yeah, and that's also, I mean, in general, even if you have, like, I know we've mentioned sons and daughters, and like our podcast name has boy and girl in it, but really our podcast is for everybody, whether you have one child or three boys, or like whatever. That's just like our family type, and so that's what we called the podcast. Um, but one of my favorite books, also that talks about loving kids uniquely, is Siblings Without Rivalry. And even if you have, two girls or two boys or however many, and they're the same sex, whatever, it's just like they are their own person, and like loving them and disciplining and like parenting them can and probably should be all different, like pending their differences.
That's interesting because my mom growing up always said that, like, I parent you guys differently because you're different kids. And that kind of gave me freedom of like, if, something was happening different with my siblings and everything. But I will say we did fight a ton growing up. And so I'm in this stage of like, okay, my kids are also close in age. What do I do about that? And I saw an email, you referenced the Dr. Becky book. She had a newsletter that came out that said, like, why is it so like competitive with siblings? And I was like, immediately read, like, what is that? And she was saying that, like, the simple phrase of saying, hey, it's really hard to be a sister sometimes, isn't it? Like, I think that's maybe the key piece that I probably missed growing up, of like, hey, it's really hard to have someone, younger than you, like, up in your space, or to have someone older with you who doesn't really want to hang out today. Or, like, I think so much too is like
Mhm.
acknowledging the autonomy of the kids, of being like, I really, really want to foster their friendship, but I can't force it. I have to also just say, like, yeah, it's really hard sometimes to have a little brother, or it's really hard sometimes to have a big sister. And I think that piece too is just as necessary as saying, like, this is your best friend for life. You only get one sibling, like, or whatever that is. Like, I think it has to be balanced with also acknowledging that, like, in their little world, this person's vying for the attention of the people they love the most and taking their toys. Like, that's annoying, you know?
I have a question. Within your siblings, were there things like you just said your mom said she parented y'all differently. Was there anything that happened differently? Let me just give an example because I'm not explaining it well. So, for example, I got a cell phone at a certain age. My sister ended up getting one before then, and my parents, like, essentially they could do whatever they wanted, but they, like, asked my permission, essentially, like, "Can we go ahead and get Emma a cell phone because of, like, the way that the world was or is?" And so I was like, "Yeah, I don't care," or whatever, but I appreciated it, because it was, like, a rule that has changed, and they were acknowledging, like, my feelings of, like, "Hey, that's not fair." Did you have anything like that where, like, one of you got something before the other and that changed, or did that not even matter?
That's such a great question, and I would say that instance was a no only because my dad was the oldest of four, and he would like growing up, the story he repeated all the time was like, I had to wait and petition my parents so long to stay up 30 extra minutes. I tried so hard, I had the most things, and then 2 years later, Sherilyn got to do it like right away, or like those kind of things, like earlier, or like he was so burned by being the oldest, and then by the time like the fourth child came, it was just free range, and so he was so vigilant of like, when we allow one kid to do things, we will take the same amount of time, which I just thought it was fair, and I felt great
Yeah.
about it because I was like, yeah, good, like I shouldn't get it right away even if I like to, and so I think even just like the open communication that like my dad had of being like, you know, we're not just going to give it right away. Like there are certain steps that they did parent differently on some fronts, but as far as like those big milestones, like a later bedtime or a cell phone or, whatever, it was pretty regimented, which actually made me feel safe.
Yeah, and I would say most of mine were similar to that too, but to the point where, like, I was surprised going into the real world because of, like, how fair my parents were, like, you, like, referenced that of just like, "Wait, I witnessed, like, other parents, like, treat their kids differently, like, in a bad way and things like that to where I was surprised, but I still, like, appreciate, like, the fairness. My parents were very diligent in that as well.
So I've got something to add for both of y'all. So, Haven, it's very interesting what you said about like kind of giving your kids verbal permission to acknowledge the difficulties that exist of being like with being a sibling, right? And I think one of you, I think Lauren, you might have said this as well, but I want to like state it super directly. It's interesting that the only communication we have to kids about their siblings is that it's such a blessing and an amazing thing to have them, and it is. But I wonder if not allowing them the space to acknowledge the difficult moments of that relationship uh, kind of hurts the bond between them unintentionally a little bit because it makes them feel like, oh, I should have this perfect relationship with my sibling that all these adults around me describe. And but I feel weird about it and nobody's acknowledging it, you know?
It is a weird kind of gaslighting of like siblings are awesome, they're so great, and you're like, are you talking about the person that just pulled my hair?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
what? Like,
Exactly.
but I learned this from Big Little Feelings before we had like my second of that the visual for a little kid is essentially it's as if Nick came home and was like, hey, in a couple months, like I'm really excited about getting a second wife. It's gonna be
I
so
just love you
fun
so
around the
much.
family. Yeah, like I just love you so much. I want to give you a second wife. You'd be like, excuse
Yeah.
me,
It's not
no,
in my
thank you.
plans, by the way.
No, hopefully not. And our kids are kind of like that, where we're like, hey, like we're gonna bring this in. It's gonna be so great for you, the little wife, like a little wife that's gonna come, and you're gonna be the big wife, and this is the little wife, and like
Mm,
it's the same to them of like, so I'm gonna have less of your love and affection, and you're gonna have someone else here. Like it's so disruptive to them that I just don't like if we don't acknowledge that their life got flipped upside down and in the moment it does not feel like there's a ton of pros about it. Like I think that's it too, where it's like, yeah, it's really hard like to be around this person all the time. Like I totally get it. Like that
yeah.
visual helped me so much where I wouldn't be super cool right off the bat either, you
That's
know?
almost like jarring
Actually,
in a
on that
healthy
example,
way.
I would never be cool, by the way. That I would like never come around to it, but like
You listening, Aaron?
metaphorically.
Are you
Yeah.
listening? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also why, like, whenever I go to meet a new child, if they have a sibling, I literally go to the sibling first. I usually bring something for that sibling. And this is actually, we have an episode on like etiquette of visiting newborns that I'll link in the show notes. But that's something I like always do to try and like make them feel like special and seen because their whole world is turned upside down and mostly in a good way, you know, acknowledge the hard, but mostly in a good way. They now have a friend. But yeah, this is the first official week of my Dear Mama series where I am talking about all things mom for moms. And that's because it's May and this month is Mother's Day. If you are looking for a good Mother's Day gift, look no further than Lunya. I say we because Nick, my husband, wears Lunya as well, has amazing silks that will make mom feel her best. They also have amazing organic Pima cotton that is perfect for summertime right now. And you can get the gift with a discount code. Use code
BGMAD
for a little extra money off your order. Try it out. We hope she loves it, and you will too.
Go do it. They're great. So that leads into the point I was going to say in response to something you said, Lauren. That was a lot of words that meant nothing. I'll probably cut it. I have something else to say to you, Lauren. That to me speaks to like your ability to recognize any lack of like equality or unfairness around you. Like you're very good at thinking like, oh, this thing I said or did or someone else said or did could possibly negatively affect this other person or this other group. How can I rectify that or guard against it? You're very good at recognizing that. And on the fairness point, I wonder if your story about the cell phone where your parents asked if it was okay to give it to your sister was them knowing they needed to parent you differently because you pay so close attention to that level of fairness. For example, I know we got different, me and my sisters got cell phones at different times. If my parents sat me down and were like, hey, one of your sisters is going to get a cell phone. I know it's an earlier age than you. I would have thought like, hey, I was playing with Legos. Like, do you need anything? Like, I don't care. You know, I would not have cared one bit about that. And I probably wouldn't have remembered or even clocked that the dates that we got or the ages we got phones were different. But for you, that was important. I wonder again if that's your parents' recognition of the way they needed to parent you that they may not have needed to parent your sister.
Maybe we can ask them. I think that they also just parented me in that way and being like, okay, this is when it's going to happen. And then they were just aware that they were changing their minds and just taking that into consideration and my feelings.
Possibly.
Speaking of, even though like the compliment fest, I'm going to turn the tables a little bit because I think the sibling thing and even the thoughtfulness of like the fairness, like Lauren, you're one of the most intentional people I know. Like you are so beyond thoughtful. Like you think in advance and you take great care and you follow up and if you say you're going to do something, you do it. And if you have to move, it really wrecks you. Like, I just think that's one of my favorite things about you is that you would go to a sibling first and it wasn't just a casual thing. It's, oh, this is the reason why, is because it matters to them and everyone's talking about the baby. Like, I think it's so, so cool about you. And it's also why I love you guys as a couple, because I remember the first time you threw a party, I was like, oh, Lauren's gonna kill it. These little like construction stuff with the worms and the flowers. But then I show up and Nick, you are hosting as much as Lauren, if not like even like more like walking around the party where I was like, oh my gosh, these people are both good at this. Like they're both so personable and they're both like exquisite hosts and they're thoughtful. And I was like, I just usually you see it in like one person and the other one's just like, more internal or there for the ride. But like, I feel like that's like your strength as a couple is like so warm and inviting, but like insanely intentional.
It's very sweet. I have to acknowledge for that example, a lot of that pre-work and all the props and the food we had, that was all Lauren. And I helped, of course, but that was all her. And I think that's a recognition of like, that is one of her superpowers. Whereas as humbly as I can say it, speaking to everybody in the room and making sure everybody feels happy, invited, and wanted there is something I really love to do. So I think that is how we play. And Lauren, you're good at that too, but I think we play together.
I just
on
heard
both
it on.
sides.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like, yeah, I can do. If I go into a room of 100 people I don't know, I want to know every single one of those 100 people, and I'm excited to get to know them. Like that would just give me fuel.
No, Nick is going on a trip in June where he knows like one person, and there'll be like 25 other people who he has never met, and that sounds like a nightmare to
I was
me.
gonna say introverts listening are saying like, this is my nightmare that you're excited about.
I'm so
But
excited about it.
Nick's so excited.
I'm so excited.
What would you be, excited or nervous?
I don't know, really depends because I'm not an introvert, I'm an
Yeah.
extrovert, but like I extrovert and I enjoy like I like being around people that I enjoy. So out of those 25, I'd be like, please let me have like two or three I like, like I think that's what I would think. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, gung ho, all 25. I'd be like, I hope there's some, people in there that I find interesting.
See, for me, it's like, and this is not the topic of this podcast, so we can move on if we need to.
In a
For
second.
me, it's like I don't expect that I'm gonna be friends with or really enjoy meeting every single person, but I do expect that there's something that I am either able to learn or able to appreciate about everybody in a room, especially almost the ones that I don't think I would normally get along with. So I think I just pursue that. Like I try to keep that curious attitude uh, about everybody that's in the room, but I don't have an expectation that I'm going to leave with X new friends. I think that might be a misconception about, not your misconception, Haven, a general misconception of extroverts is that we want to collect all these new relationships and friends. I would love to do that, but it's not my end goal. My end goal is meeting as many people as I can to try and learn as much as I can and hopefully serve them well along the way.
You may not leave thinking you're friends, but they'll definitely be like, wow, Nick's awesome.
And if you're watching this and you want to be Nick's friend, Nick will definitely be your friend. That's not what he's saying at all.
Oh, I
But
do love more friends. Yes.
yeah, and it's also why I like to bring him to events with me, especially if I know no one, is because I'm like, cool, you talk to people, I'll just stand here. Well, I'll talk, but I don't have to worry about it. And silence doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people.
Anyway, thank you for the compliment, Haven. You're very
Yes,
sweet.
thank you. So you were talking about extrovertedness, and I think that, Nick, you have definitely passed that on to our children just in your parenting style. Haven, is there something, you already said confidence, but is there something that you hope you pass to your kids, and it can be different per child, through this parenting style?
Yeah, I want them to believe that they're capable people, that, they don't have to, they can look outside for help. I'm not saying like be so self-sufficient, but they can try it first. And then if they can't, then okay, let's go for there, but just give it a go. Like, see how it works. So I would hope that they would just feel like internally that, like, well, why wouldn't I try? Or well, why wouldn't I attempt it? So I would hope that they would just kind of have that falling forward mentality.
It's good.
Haven, you've said multiple times you want your kids to feel capable. True or false, you do those affirmations with them, and one of them is I'm capable. Is that correct?
Oh, that's funny, the affirmations. We didn't make these. There's a show, Super Kitties, and they say these four things. My kids started picking up. I was like, those sound good enough. Like, why wouldn't we,
What are they?
No. So it's, I am brave, I am smart, I'm strong, I am kind. And so we've just been saying that. And Aaron and I, like, we're like, we really should make our own family core values. But, like, hey, Super Kitties kind of covered it for this
Yeah.
age right now. So it's not capable, but it's along there of, like, brave, smart, strong, and kind.
I've mentioned this before, but one of my favorite moments is when, so we do something similar with our kids as well. And it's more than just those four, but we noticed that one day they were playing outside with their bikes. We were with them, and Cypress is trying to like pull his little kid bike up the stairs. And I hear him saying something, and then I get closer and I hear him saying to himself, without trying to get our attention, I am strong, I am capable. And I was like, yes. It just felt like it locked in, like the actual intent of why we do these affirmations is to empower and encourage. And he's not only getting that, but affirming himself in private during a moment of difficulty. So cool.
I love that. It's really teaching your kids to talk to themselves,
Yeah.
Yeah, because that
I
inner
love it.
dialogue matters. Do y'all still sing your little family song?
Wheat's family roll call?
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that it has a name.
Yes.
The pride behind her voice when she said that name, I loved it.
It's the dumbest song that I made up.
Wait, will you sing it for us?
Yeah, I'm a terrible singer. So can you
Aaron, are you
auto-tune
there?
this?
Can you come and sing?
Yeah, I wish he was here, but Nick just auto-tuned this for the pod, okay? It's like a double clap situation. It goes like, Wheats family roll call. I'm daddy. I'm the dad. I'm mommy. I'm the mom. I'm Isley. I'm the big sister. I'm Echo. I'm the little brother. And then da 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 da. Wheats family roll call. You just do it again.
Oh my gosh.
And the person who's saying is like they say that. So like Isley would say her part, I'd say my part.
Immediate
That's how it
jealousy.
goes.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you guys have 4 people in your family. You really can just interchange Cypress and
Yes.
Olive, and
I
you can really make
know.
it work for you.
Mm-hmm. Also, something to know about Haven is that she's a drummer, so there's her
Yeah.
impeccable beats.
A drummer and not a singer.
I'll auto tune it and I'll just say it's like I'll clip it and say, hey, this is one of T-Pain's new songs.
Yes. Add
Yeah.
like
Hey.
some like artificial claps.
Yeah.
But can we just say T-Pain doesn't actually need auto-tune. He actually has a really good voice, and
That's a
if you
true
didn't know
statement.
that.
Fact.
So we talked about it a little bit earlier, but parenting is not just about kids, it's also your relationship with yourself. And so it's good to take time for yourself and to know your boundaries and not be afraid to use them. And so I was finally finished the book, The 5 Principles of Parenting by Dr. Lisa Pressman. And she talks about boundaries in a chapter. And I thought of you, Haven, and something she said. She said, boundaries are love, limits are safety. She also said this quote. It's not her, but it's really good. Boundaries are the distance I can love you and me simultaneously. And I just thought of you with that just because you're so good at creating your boundary and sticking to it, which is actually really hard to do, especially as an adult. And I know it's come somewhat easy to do that for you. And so I was just wondering, is it the same level of easy for you to make and keep boundaries for yourself as it is for making boundaries for your children?
Yeah, I think for me, I know that boundaries are like what do I really need in order to do this well? And so I think of like I think I've just reconciled that sometimes my boundary is going to inconvenience someone. It's not going to like be malicious, it's not going to hurt, but it probably may not be their preference. And what I think about that is like during the weekdays, I'll get up at like 5 or 5:30 and go work out. And I try and come home before the kids get up at like 7:30. Like depends on what time the workout class is, if I'm showering everything, but I don't always make it home, and so Aaron's the one to wake up with them most weekdays. And I know that's an inconvenience for him. I know it's not his preference, and I know that he would prefer either I don't work out or, come home like right early and cut it off. But I do know he also loves me and he's totally willing for me to do what I need to do. And so he's never like, don't do that, or I wish you wouldn't. But I know it's not his preference. I think part of me is thinking if I'm going to be the best mom, I have to take this time for myself. And I also don't want to rush. I'd like to do the steam room after. I'd like to shampoo my hair. Like, I don't want to be too back on an intense timetable so that then the rest of the day I'm set up to love them better, to come in and tap in and then take over breakfast or whatever. And so I think the reason that like I'm okay having boundaries is one, I know it makes me better ultimately for everyone. But two, I know that it may not be the most convenient for someone, but just like I'm willing to be inconvenienced if Aaron needs to do something, he's willing to do that for me. And so I think that's also it where it's like I give myself permission to not be convenient to everyone.
And you also, I think it was in like your second podcast episode or something like that, where you said it may hurt them, but it won't harm them, and that there's
Yes.
a difference there.
Yeah.
That to me made me think of high school football, where we talk about the difference between getting hurt and getting injured. So one of them is an expression of pain and how it feels to you, and the other one is an actual impact to your physical body that limits your ability. I don't know how directly that
Absolutely.
relates. Yeah.
No, I like it.
No, I think it's right. Like it may quote unquote hurt Aaron to have to wake up and be the one to like get the kids sorted, out of bed and do a diaper change and get breakfast started, but it's not going to injure him. And I'm so glad he's gracious enough to do that for me, but I can't bend over backwards because he prefer I wouldn't.
Yeah. That I mean, hey, people pleasers, listen to what she just said, right? Yeah, it's okay if somebody else is inconvenient. I mean, this is already your point, Haven, so I don't have to steal it. It's okay if somebody is inconvenienced by something you need to do for you. I don't, this is probably not an original quote, but the words that came into my mind when you were describing like what you needed to do for yourself and the boundary associated with it, was this. If you are worried about the boundary you have drawn hurting somebody, are you confident in the reason that you have drawn that boundary? So, like, do you accept the impact of, hey, this is something I have to do for me? And is it still worth it? In your case, right? The impact of you going to work out in the morning is Aaron has to take a little bit more uh, of that time by himself to take care of the children. But you and him are collectively accepting that because it has a benefit of something that you need to do for you.
Totally. Yeah, I think it is that kind of cost benefit of, is it really, is this the ask I want to make?
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what you said, Nick, but I still think that that's really hard because just because I think about the other person so much, sometimes it clouds my judgment for myself and is detrimental to myself. But I think you already know that about
Sure.
me.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can also jump so far over the fence and be like what they could or could not, or, like even this, like Aaron, you guys know him, he's like so involved in like a morning with the kids is not a big deal to him, but it's because he's a night owl and mornings are tougher for him. And I'm a morning person and nights are tougher for him.
Mm.
So if he had to leave and do something at the nighttime when we're putting the kids down, that's actually more wildly inconvenient for me than if he left in the morning. Because mornings are like my jam. I could totally do that. So I think it's also like not jumping over and being like, this is the worst time for him to do this. He's so tired, and putting his needs above my needs. Like, I think it is such
Yeah.
a dance of like, it's not itemizing back and forth, but it's
Mm-mm.
also if I jumped on the side of his fence and been like, he probably stayed up late working on a project and he's not a morning person and the kids can be so loud. Like, I would talk myself out of it, but I have to also stay on my side of the fence and be like, this is my request. Like, you determine if you're willing to do that or not, but I can't jump in and over empathize with all the ramifications of you. All I can do is say, I love to work out in the morning. It really pleases me and it would make my day better. Can I do that? And not
Mm-hmm.
jump into all the things of it's how it's going to, inconvenience them.
Maybe a negative impact or a negative effect, rather, like a side effect of you being so empathetic and able to identify who in the room needs attention and needs some type of service. Maybe the other side of that, the side effect is it causes you to just set yourself aside more often than you need to honor the needs and wants and feelings of others.
It does. And I'm working on it.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just like it. What it is saying is that you are more willing to put others in front of you repeatedly, even at the detriment of yourself, even if it's harming you a little bit. But to Haven's point, that's where you have to find that balance a little bit. Like for example, Haven, you wouldn't use every bit of your free time outside of work to go do things for you and expect Aaron to pick up all of that, right? There's a balance and a dance, as you referenced, between the two of you. He does things he needs to, you pick up the slack, same thing the other way, right?
And it kind of even goes into the parenting thing so easily because, like, that was like between me and my partner. But, like, I think about this a lot of like, I'll kind of joke with my mom that I'm like, you were so much better of a mom than me because she was so extra in the sense of like, she homeschooled us and she would do like if we were like, what was our favorite apple? She would have all of them on a plate and give us a taste test and a little sheet to go, like, what do we rate and review? Like, just so thoughtful because she was fully working in the home. She wasn't working outside the home when we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me is like, oh my gosh, like if I get into this tailspin of, well, it would be best for my kids is if I was fully there with them and maybe I needed to homeschool them or if they want to know what apple, I'm not doing any tasting kits. I'm just saying, well, you like Honey Crisp because that's the one you finish. Like, like there's all these things I could go into, but I'm like, okay, I have to be true to myself as a parent. And I love working outside the home and I love being present with you. And I maybe am not going to be so extra and all these things, even though I was on the receiving end and it was so fun. Like, I think so much of it too is like in parenting or in, partnership, whatever boundaries is being like, well, who am I and what can I give? And not jump over of like, well, what would be the absolute best scenario for my kids in all like in all
Yeah.
areas, because sometimes that's not like wouldn't be true to me, even though it would probably be my kid's favorite to do all that stuff, if that makes sense. It kind of correlates where it then drops into the parenting thing, is we can kind of go all over the place with like what is best for our kids, but at the detriment of what's best for ourselves.
Your mom sounds like Lauren's mom.
Just awesome.
I mean, yeah,
Wonderful.
but just like
Amazing.
overly servant minded and just like, didn't she used to bring like daily breakfast into you before school, Lauren? Like, there's so much that she did for you and still does.
Yeah, she would bring her breakfast into our room, and she would do my hair till probably middle school. Or there was when I had like a bob or the haircut that like you really needed to wash it in the morning. She would walk me into the kitchen and have a palette on the counter and wash my hair, like, and I'd have like a quilt over me, and she would just like wash and massage my hair in the
The
morning
standard of
before school.
care that she has set for me is so high.
Yeah,
It's
to have
so high.
someone tuck you in with a quilt and massage your head, like, is she
Yeah.
adopting? You know, I'll come. I
Hey,
love
it
an
sounds
extra.
like both of your moms are pretty good at this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things that's troublesome for me, I'm never helping somebody to receive help on the other end, but I do assume that they will help me. And I think that was one of the things, like, even just to give an example, when I worked corporately, I would do a lot of things for other people and I would do it right when they needed to. But then when I needed things, I learned that they were not willing to do that for me. And I was like, what? Like, this does not make sense. Like, I help you all the time. And so it can lead to some sort of resentment. And something that I think you're really good at, Haven, also is when there's a conflict or something you need to address, even though it's hard, you do, like, in your own words, face the storm, and you do that just to kind of reconcile and grow stronger. Is this a conversation that you have with your kids already about, like, if something bothers them to talk to the person versus just like holding it in?
Yeah, I'm really trying to instill that, especially in my daughter, because again, my son he'll tell you exactly what he's thinking and feeling, at any time.
I saw you shared it on stories, and we can cut this if it's personal, but where he said, "Who will you miss from school? No one," or
Yeah.
whatever.
It was a teacher appreciation feedback, and I was just writing down what he was saying. And the question was, who will you miss from school? And he just said, no one. And I was like, okay, you got it.
So direct.
But with Isley, I try and have her find that within herself, like I want her to kind of say that, because she will go more inward and she will go more like just like quiet or crying or kind of pulling aside. So I think she's probably going to have to do it in her own way growing up, where it's probably going to take time and revisit. I don't know if it'll be like an in the moment kind of scenario. But that's something I'm trying to kind of feel of what's the most natural balance for her, where maybe my approach isn't going to be the same as hers, but how can I kind of instill the same idea of, if something's bothering you, like it's worth it and you're enough to like say it, and it's, even if it's maybe not as direct or in the moment. Like I one time heard Alicia Keys, when she was fighting with her mom, they would write letters back and forth because that was just the easiest way for them to express themselves, was like handwriting. So part of me is like, I need to kind of find out what's her way of expressing her feelings. Like, does she need to take time? Does she need to write it down eventually? So I definitely want her to get to that kind of end goal of the concept, but I'm figuring her path is going to be a different way to achieve that than mine is.
I like that, and I also, it makes me think of when you say people ask you things about your kids and you're like, "I don't know. I don't know them all the way yet." And I love when you probably can say that in the better way that makes it more understandable.
Yes, yeah. Like someone was asking, like with soccer, like that, because my daughter will go and play so much if I'm not there, but when I come, she kind of wants to sit in my lap. And I was talking with a friend about it. They're like, "Why do you think she does that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm still getting to know her.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
And I
know her
love
yet."
that. I love
Yeah,
that so
maybe.
much.
Yeah, maybe when she's older, she'll tell me.
Yeah, I mean, there's beauty in that too, because it shows that you are expectant of your children to be their own and have individual innate qualities that are not just inherited, right?
Hmm.
There's a sense of, hey, Ted Lasso, curiosity in that, where like you're excited to learn who your kids are, you know?
Well, and you're also really good of like when someone says they're similar to one of you or something like that. They're like, "I'm an original."
Yes,
Like, I'm
totally.
my own person.
Totally. Yeah, what am I thinking? I should have had your twin book up here. I think
No.
maybe it's in Isley's bed with her.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, she's been putting it in her bed.
I love it.
Isn't that cute?
That is so cool that something you made is in other people's homes.
Hello. Lauren and Nick did not ask me to do this. I asked to do this. I would like to promote the book It Takes Two that Lauren wrote because you'd think, okay, it's a great gift for someone who's pregnant with twins or someone who has twins in their life. As someone who does not have children like that are twins, I still love showing my kids this book. One, because their little friends are in it, obviously. Hello, Cypress and Olive. But two, because like just as much as I want to give them experiences of like just other ways of living or other families or just worlds outside of their own, I feel like books are the best way to do that and to normalize that, hey, there are other like different families out there that are different from our own, and what is it like? It brings on such great dialogue. So I would say this is a great book just if you have kids in general. It's so great to expose them to stuff outside. It opens up such great dialogue of like sometimes twins look alike, sometimes they don't. Like these are like concepts that we take for granted as adult, but like a 2-year old doesn't know that. Like they're like they saw identical twins, they would be like, what in the world is happening? Like, it's so awesome to kind of like put this information here into it. And so I would say it's such a small, simple, easy read. My daughter keeps it in her bed a lot because she just likes to have a little night book. And so I'm just going to plug this. You can get this on Amazon, or I'm sure in the show notes have the other details. But I love It Takes Two. And even if you don't have twins, it's worth picking up a copy.
Thanks, Haven.
So
You're welcome.
sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of books, we've talked a little bit of books on here, but Haven, what are some of your favorite parenting books? Maybe give us your personal favorite and or it's okay if it's the same, but a book that someone could read if they were trying to be more free range, cool mom parenting.
Yes. Okay, that's interesting. The Gift of Failure, I think, is pretty good for like a free range kind of parent where it's like failure is so okay and it's necessary and important. So it kind of relieves a little bit of the stress of like the anxiety when you're letting your kid potentially fail. Then you mentioned I love Dr. Becky's Good Inside. I love the Sissy Goff and David Thomas library. He has one about raising emotionally strong boys, and she has one about raising, I think it's
Worry
about
free.
worry-free girls, and she has one called The Worry-Free Parent. I like those a lot too because they're specific for the ages that my kids are right now. But those are probably the most top of mind ones I like.
Um, if you want to plug yourself, you also have, if you want to read books with Haven, she has a virtual book
Oh, yes.
club. Do you want to
Thank
talk about
you.
that?
Yes, would love the plug. So this is my first one ever. I kind of got the feedback that people would like to continue the conversation outside of the podcast. And so I was like, okay, let's start a book club. And so our first book that we're reading is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And I don't know when this airs, but we're going to be discussing it on June 27th. And I actually saw Kim Scott, the author, at a conference, and I told her, I was like, hey, my book club is going to be doing your book. And she was like, well, if you'd like to have like a virtual Q&A, let me know. And I was like blown away and honored. So she's going to come to the end of our discussion on the 27th virtually for
That's
the
so cool.
Q&A. So very,
Yeah.
very excited.
How does someone sign up for that? Do
You can
they
go
email
to
you?
my website, havenpod.com, and sign up for my email newsletter. Or you can just email me hello@havenpod.com and I can get you the information for the book club.
Haven as in Nancy.
HAV as in Victor, EN as in Nancy.
Perfect. I'll put it in the show notes too. So, Haven, you're very cool. You're not judgmental. You're inclusive. What would be a good first step, like a suggestion for somebody to do if they were trying to be more cool, a cool parent?
In parenting,
Hmm.
I think, I mean, the non judgmental, I think there's such a bad rap because then I think it means laissez-faire. Like I have strong opinions on how I want to parent my kids. I just will not have strong opinions on how you should parent your kids.
Mm.
I think it also is that posture of like I have definitely made my own choices about how I'm going to do things that I think are vetted, and I did some research and there's reasons I came to the conclusion. But any parent who's doing something different, it is not my place to pass judgment, have opinions. I don't know them. I don't know their kids. Like, I do think that each parent is unique for each child. And so I'm a person of faith, and part of me is like, God gave you that kid, for a reason. Like, you know them best. Go for it. I'm going to do it the way that I do it because, I trust my intuition. I trust like my relationship with Jesus. And I also trust the research I've done. And I trust asking mom friends. And I reserve the right to change my mind. So I think actually before anyone is like, oh, I want to actively try and be cool, I think a lot of it is just like lean into your choices and then relax with other people's choices. Like, how they choose to parent has nothing to do with me. Like, it may affect whether I let my kids play with theirs, it may affect on that kind of thing, but like any of the other stuff of like, literally, I'm trying to think of like the toddler stuff that comes up of like either co-sleeping or not, or bottle feeding or breastfeeding, or like, can you scooter around by yourself, or you need to wear a helmet, like all of those things are just not my place to have an opinion on people. And so I think that you become cool when you just say like, I'm going to only stay in my lane and use my
Mm.
energy only for my stuff.
Mm. I'm trying to think about where I read it or whatnot, but it was basically saying, don't worry about what other people think about the boundaries you set and the things you do for your kids, because their reactions often say more about them than it does about you, and that they might be struggling with hearing what you're saying because it makes them rethink everything they've ever thought was true or what they thought was like the right way.
I think it speaks to Nick what you said too, is like sometimes the difficult part is feeling like you want to voice something for the observer parent. But part of me thinks our kids are so smart. Like, they will know if I'm performative parenting. Like, they're gonna know internally, even if they don't like understand it, they're intuitive beings. They're gonna feel off of being like, my mom typically doesn't say stuff like that. Like, what's going on? Or then they're going to clock, wow, my mom changes her behavior based on who's around, and she values what they think about her more than how it feels to me to hear how
Mm.
she said that. And I want my kids to know that, like, I value them and no one has to understand what's happening, and I trust them and I'll go to them direct. I'm not going to do something for the sake of another parent that I really, just because they're there, like, I don't really care. I care more about my kid in that moment. So I think that's it too, is like the cool parent, like if you have such a strong sense of self and understanding of your kid that like not everyone has to understand it, and you don't have to do anything performative to try and prove a point that you're engaged or care or, understanding.
Mm, so good. Is that your favorite piece of parenting advice to give? Like, just stay in your lane, or do you have another one? It's okay if it's the same one.
It's so funny. I don't think I've ever been asked point blank like parenting advice. It's always like specifics of like, do you like this swaddle or this one, or how would you handle, like if I had to give a blanket piece of like parenting advice, I would just say like, get to know your kid's uniqueness and then
Mm,
go off of that. Like, your kid is so dynamic and so interesting, and they're not going to be in these like understandings of books. Like I read even the Sissy Goff stuff, some of the stuff about the girl stuff I'm learning and catering towards Echo, or some of the boy stuff. Like, it's
mm,
who are they and what are, I like to accumulate so many tools and then throw it out of my head and go with intuition.
mm.
Like, so I want to be like, as far as parenting, I would say like, yeah, read everything you want, ask everything you want, but then ultimately throw it out the window and go off of your intuition.
Mm. What's your favorite piece of parenting advice you've received from someone else? Maybe not like what you read in a book, but someone told you directly.
Mm. It's not advice, it's just, you even kind of touched on like, we have great mothers, and that's like, just, I feel like it's a leg up on everything. So one thing that I just always think of is, if something happened and we spilled something or broke something or whatever, my mom would just say accidents happen. And I find myself saying that all the time with the kids, is just, oh, accidents happen, or, like, because my daughter can be pretty hard on herself, and I'm like, accidents happen. Like, I think the biggest piece of advice is just, it would sound like saying accidents happen, but what it really means is grace, that these are little humans really trying to navigate the world. And, you know, as much as I'm going to show them the way and guide and coach, I also really want to be a gracious accidents happen kind of mom.
Mm-hmm.
The other day, I spilled my coffee next to Cypress, and I looked down and realized he was there because it was on the counter and he was kind of down next to me. And I got annoyed with myself first, but I was like proud that I didn't have an outward expression of frustration. I just made like a funny sound. And then I turned to him and I was like, okay, this in my head, I thought this is an opportunity to show him like I break things and spill things and screw up all the time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I told him, I was like, you know how sometimes you spill your eggs or your oatmeal or your water? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, so do I. See, Papa just spilled some coffee. And he was like, Papa spilled coffee. And I was so happy. I was like, good. He gets to see me, you know, not succeed all the time. And that sounds prideful, but like the point is he gets to see my mistakes and I want him to see my mistakes.
I love that. It makes me think of something I heard Dr. Becky say before, where she's like, the kids see you as like, you don't have struggling, like, you don't struggle at all writing. You know, you've done so much practice. Like, they're just trying to figure out letters and it's really hard, that like, it's actually important to intentionally mess up in front of them and then just show them. Like, sometimes I'll, like, if I was playing catch with Isley, I would miss it and be like, oh, can't believe I missed that. Oh my gosh, like, let me go get it again. So it's not like I'm always catching all of the balls, or I'm always doing everything right, or writing all of my letters, or maybe I'll misspell something and be like, oh my gosh, I wrote that word wrong. I can't believe it. Guess I'll have to do it again. You know, like, kind of showing them, because otherwise, like, us just living our lives, we are adults, we are more mature. Like, it's going to be natural for us, but like almost being like, how can I mess up in front of my kids right now so I can model for them how
That's
to
good.
handle it.
That's good. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Love, +1, all of that. We kind of talked about that last week, Nick, about perfection. We don't have to get into
I actually want, I'm not saying we, how do I say this? I want you on a bunch more episodes, Haven. And whether it's on an episode or not, I am curious your feedback of our last episode, because we disagree on the use of the word perfect a little bit. That's just a plug. You can listen to it and we'll talk about it.
I would love to be a guest because you guys are very complimentary. So anytime, I will do my homework and come in with my own opinions.
We'll flip. The next one will be super critical and we'll see if you still agree.
Perfect.
No.
Totally.
Well, Haven, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being such a cool mom and a cool person and a cool friend.
I was honored to come. I'm glad to count you both as friends.
Would you kindly share all of your information? Like, how can people find you?
Yes. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it's at Haven the Podcast. And you can follow for like all the short form clips and updates. And then long form, it's Haven with an exclamation point. So that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes as well. But I talk about on there just things I'm curious about, and I just follow the thread of where that takes me. Oftentimes it's relationships, sometimes it's parenting. A lot of it is kind of internal structures or ideas or thoughts. And so if you have any interest, then I'd love to have you come over and listen to an episode.
What's your tagline again?
Haven is the name of the podcast, and it's a safe place for curiosity and conversation.
I mean, yeah, thank you for coming. It's, you know, a joy and an honor to get to know you and Aaron and your family and learn from you guys. And it's even better to have you on and listen to you like give this level of detailed advice and context of why you're able to be the parent and the mother that you are.
It's fun. I love that you guys do it in your kids' room. I loved doing it in my kids' room. I feel like it's just so brilliant. Like, you understand exactly like the context of what we're talking about, and it feels so real, where I was like, you know, like, I probably could make this look less cluttered, but I'm like, no, that's the real stuff. You know, this is really a kid's room. And so I think it was just fun to kind of keep it fresh.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
See you 2 days from now.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for growing with us, y'all. Bye.
Bye.
Boy, girl, mom, and dad. Gotta wash those butts together. It's a trip, but we'll guide you through with tips and tricks for boys and girls too.